Hi, everyone. I'm Shelley Lyle.
And I'm Brian Avery.
And welcome
to Voices from the Field,
a podcast brought to you by the Department of Sport Management at the University of Florida. This podcast was created to share the career journeys of sport industry professionals. Our hope is that you learn the ins and outs of different sport industry professions. We're excited to be with all of you this week and with our special guest, Justin Sua. Justin's education background is from the Brigham Young University, where he received his Bachelor's of Arts in Communication. And then he went on to get his master's from the University of Utah in sport and performance psychology. He went on to work for Performance Expert. He was also the head of mental conditioning department at IMG Academy, the mental skills coordinator for the Boston Red Sox, the mental performance coach for the Cleveland Browns, and now is the head of mental performance for the Tampa Bay Rays. So, Justin, we're so glad to have you today.
Thanks for having me, Shelley. Looking forward to this.
Yeah. So I know you and I have kind of gone back and forth and had some discussions, but I really would just love to share with the students about your career journey and, kind of from your graduation until now, and what drew you into this field specifically.
Yeah. What's interesting is, so after I got my bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism, I thought I was going to be the next Stuart Scott. For those who aren't familiar with that, he is the iconic broadcaster for ESPN. Playing baseball, being an athlete myself, it was a natural move right into the broadcast booth. My first interview I ever did was with the Lakers, and I hated it. It was my internship. Couldn't stand it. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought, what a waste of 4 years. So I went into teaching high school. So I was a high school teacher for 5 years. And then I wanted to get my master's degree in religious education, of all things. I got declined, thankfully. And as a result, my default was the field of sport and performance psychology. I went and I applied to that for that degree. And I pretty much had to beg myself in because I had none of the prerequisites. And I really didn't know what it entailed. Terrible GRE score, and but luckily they allowed me in, and I thrived both educationally and just in the classroom setting, and then ended up having a career afterwards. And so it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know you had kind of talked about your education background, having taught and then really transitioning. And we have some students who are in kind of a career pivot as well. So what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I like the word you use, pivot. What was funny is because we have 3 children, they're all teenagers now. One day we were eating dinner and my son goes, "I want to be like you, Dad, when I grow up." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I want to be a quitter." And I remember thinking, wait, what? Wait, what do you mean Dad's a quitter? He goes, "Yeah, you quit all your jobs. You quit being a baseball player to be broadcasting. You quit broadcasting to be a teacher. You quit being a teacher And that's how my kids were viewing my career path. And I taught them a word that you just said. I taught them, let me introduce you to a word called pivoting. We pivoted from position to position, from career to career. And I ended up doing more lateral thinking, taking the competencies and the skills I learned in one domain and went to another one and went to another one and went to another one. And so it is scary. You feel like you don't have control. You feel like you're not in the driver's seat. You're in the passenger seat, and life is happening to you. You question your ability. You question your path. You question what you're good at. And I lived through all of that. And it was a lot of ups and downs, particularly a lot of downs.
Yeah, Justin, I have to interject there for a moment because I've had a lot of pivots in my career as well. I don't think my kids have called me a quitter, and I've got 3 also. But I've had to explain why I'm making these adjustments and to be flexible within my career so that new doors would open and opportunities or we change as we grow, we age, our experiences will mold us to a point where we aren't the same people when we started off in a specific industry or business line. So it's great to hear that you've kind of gone down that same pathway. I think that's pretty exceptional to share.
I love that you said that. Yes, the industry changes, we change. That's so true. I love how you articulated that.
Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think all the things you went through, like you said, you apply them to what you're doing now. And I think that's for anybody, in a lot of ways, pivoting their careers. There's so many takeaways from taking a sport to a different career or taking a different career into sports, and how you can use all the skill sets along the way, for sure.
100% agree. 100% agree with that.
And can you give an overview of the duties, kind of the functions and responsibilities of your current position?
Great. Yeah, my current position. What's interesting is in this field, if you would have asked me that question when I was with the Cleveland Browns, it would have been different than when I was at the IMG Academy, then working with military soldiers. Now it's, let's just say, I'll give you a concrete example. We have a game, 7 o'clock against the New York Yankees at home. I will wake up, take my kids to school, probably go on a lunch date with my wife, and then head to the field, head to work at about 1 o'clock, 1:30, get a little workout in. I have my routine. And then from 1:30 until the game starts, it could be a number of different things, from meeting one-on-one with players or coaches to doing team sessions or with the hitters or with the pitchers, and then observing the game, either from the clubhouse or from the dugouts, and then sometimes talking to players after the game, and then head home and do it all again the next day. And so it's there's a lot of pressure in the games, there's a lot of excitement, and you never know what you're going to get, but it's pretty fun.
That's awesome. And do you, from working from football to baseball and maybe even IMG, you probably work for more high school as well. Is it a distinctive difference in how you apply your background to each sport and the level of play?
100%. It is completely different. Even football to baseball, those two sports are completely different. Then even pitchers versus hitters, offensive players versus defensive players, the quarterback versus the receiver, team sport athletes versus individual sport athletes, males versus females, older athletes versus child athletes, youth athletes, completely different. And you need to take into consideration the context and the environment of whatever situation you walk into.
That's great. That's super helpful. I think for students wanting to go into your field too, it's knowing like what is their better fit probably too, like what sport. It's not just across the board. Oh, well, I do mental performance. It is very unique to baseball. It's going to look different than football versus hockey versus basketball, things like that. So that's helpful because I do think sometimes it can look broad and we just generalize sports psychology, but to really kind of hone in on which direction you want to take.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And Justin, if I interject here, I mean, the complexity of what you just outlined, how do you contend with that? I mean, going from a child athlete, to an adult male or a team sport versus individual, how are you kind of weaving through that process?
Yeah, it was a lot of trial and error, especially at first. When you come in, you get sideswiped by just the intensity of these elite athletes, or you just learn as you go. I think it's being willing to see where you fail and where you stumble, and you'll notice patterns. And I think it really starts with coming in with the white belt mentality, learning and listening more than speaking. The first months, maybe even a year or so, I'm watching, I'm observing, I'm talking to everyone I could possibly talk to understand their world, to understand their domain. What are the nuances of their sports, of what they do? I want to talk to the coaches. I want to talk to the scouts. I want to talk to the parents. I want to talk to the cafeteria workers, like everybody, just to gain a broader perspective of what this person is going through. So I can take a multi-dimensional approach to gather as much intel as I can so that I can see where I can be of most beneficial to the people I'm working with. But yes, it's difficult at first, especially when you're walking into an environment that you know nothing of, particularly when I worked with the WWE for a little bit. I've never been backstage for a WWE wrestling event and to see what they do when they're training. You just have to observe and watch with a very critical eye to see if you can pick up some patterns and not jump to the conclusions, acting like you know what you're talking about. And, I work with baseball players, so I know what it's like to work with football players, or I worked in the pro sports, so I know what it's like to work with youth athletes. You need to be intellectually humble and know that whatever domain you walk into, you are learning, and to learn the best you can by asking good questions.
Yeah, no, I always took that approach too. When I took a new job, I would kind of step back and say, I'm going to take a year to really understand what's going on in the environment around me. And the complexity of what you've got going on is immense. So I'm impressed. That's admirable. So hats off to you in regards to that.
Thanks. I've failed a lot. I'm still trying to figure it out.
I think those that are most successful have failed more often than they've not, if you will. So
Well, and speaking of humbleness, like what for a sports psychologist, like I think it sounds like it's required to build relationships, to be relatable, coming in and trying to help, but like on a very different level. And I think that's, when we've even spoken, off camera, you just seem very relatable and willing to say, hey, I didn't do that right. Or like my approach it didn't work that time. And so that makes you just human and probably really easy to connect with as a player.
I appreciate you saying that, Shelley. I learned really quick to not take myself too seriously. I think early in my career, I had this mindset of, who am I going to mental skill today? Who can I shove visualization? Whose throat can I shove visualization down? Or whose throat can I shove a positive self-talk down? But it doesn't work like that. And I ended up learning the hard way that the athletes, the people, the coaches, the manager, the mom, the dad, they're the hero of their own journey. And to respect their experience and to respect their knowledge and respect their path. And I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm the guide on the side. I'm the Yoda to they're the Luke Skywalker. I'm just the old green little guy on the side to help them with occasional tools that they already have, to shine lights on the tools they had that got them to where they are, and maybe help them develop some other ones. And once I learned to do that, it took so much pressure off of me. I didn't have to be the hero. It's like, okay, like how can I help you see the greatness that lies within you? And that's when the job became really fun.
That's awesome. And one more, kind of back to what you mentioned, what, you look like day in and day out, what your career looks like, and maybe in season, out of season, but what does your off season look like? Do you work with different teams throughout the year? What does that schedule kind of look like for you?
Yeah, off season. So with baseball, once the World Series is over, you have that time to be with your family. You're gone so much that this is a lot of downtime. The one thing about me that my family knows, and if anyone follows me, I'm not putting a plug for my social media, but you'll see that I'm very active, whether it be with a podcast or with my social media. It's because I absolutely love this. I absolutely love this. And I don't watch movies. I don't go hunting. I don't fish. I don't go out with my friends. I do this. I read books. I make podcasts. I love it so much. And so in the off season, yes, I'll work with corporations, or I'll do a Zoom call with some people. I'll work with a lot of the players off season. We'll do like off season stuff, but occasionally organizations will reach out and say, hey, would you like to speak to us or work with us and work with this group? And I do it as my time allows.
Awesome.
Yeah, Justin, I'm hearing the passion just rain through with respect to the discussion we're having today. So I love the energy and enthusiasm for the job. And yet sometimes it can get difficult, if you will, to arrive at a conclusion of where do I belong and how do I fit in this role? And how did you determine where you belonged, and what did that kind of evolution look like for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I first started, I experienced the imposter syndrome, and I still experience it very, very, very often. The imposter syndrome, like thinking that you're going to be found out, thinking that who am I to have these jobs? Who am I to work with the client, with the athletes that I work with? There's so many other people who are smarter, more educated, more qualified than I am. And then after talking to some of these athletes, you realize they have the exact same feelings. Navy SEALs have the same feelings. CEOs, general managers have the same feeling. And you realize very quick the notion of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I remember when I first got my master's degree, my confidence was through the roof. I know everything there is about sports psychology. I know I can help you be mentally tough. And then once I got a little bit more experience, I realized I know nothing. What am I even doing? I had insecurities. And then the more experience you get, your confidence is a little more calibrated because you know the parameters of your circle of competence. And so I think, to answer explicitly your question, where did I feel I belong? I took a look at myself. I stopped comparing myself to other people and say, wow, look at all of her education. Look at his ability to do this. And I started to leverage myself. No one could be me. no one has my upbringing. No one has the collection of my experience, my just my parenting, my DNA, the combination of my experience, my talents. And I use that as leverage. I said, okay, let me just lean into the best of me I can. And I'm not for everybody. And I'm going to choose me. I'm going to choose myself, and I'm going to just strengthen my strengths and make sure my weaknesses don't derail my strengths. But I'm still a work in progress. But I think that's where it really changed for me, is once I stopped comparing and realized, okay, let me go all in on myself and leverage my experience, my skills, my values, because there's no other combination in the world like me.
Yeah, that's a great response. I sympathize with you. It feels like the more I learn, the less I know on a daily basis.
Yes. Yes.
So yes. It's humbling, and I think you've mentioned that a couple of times. Not to mention, you're very reflective. You're taking a look at your inner self, your outer self, and your position or placement amongst others, and outside of that kind of internal reflection that's going on. What skills have you found that have been very helpful to help you arrive at that place?
I think it's a skill. I have insatiable curiosity.
Okay.
I want to learn. I want to learn about others, and I want to learn about myself. And I just want to continue to improve and understand what makes me tick, what makes other people tick. And I think that the skill of curiosity combined with this notion that I'm always a work in progress. I think we call it the growth mindset in our field, where you learn from your failures, you embrace obstacles. I think that's another one as well. I think another skill is I look back. So what's funny is when I tell my story of how I got to where I am, I remember, Shelley, when you and I were talking, it's easy to look back and tell this coherent story of and this is how I arrived to where I am today. But when you're in the middle of it, you're thinking, what a mess. Like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm all over the place. I'm lost. I'm 28 years old with 3 kids under 6, and I'm a high school teacher, and we have no money, and we're just struggling. And then once you know it, things end up working out. But I think I'm grateful. When I was a young kid, and I don't know if I shared this with you, Shelley, my father's an immigrant to this country. And he ended up saying, he realized young that I think he read somewhere that public speaking was one of the biggest fears for Americans. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to teach my kids, me and my siblings, to not fear public speaking. And one way to not fear public speaking is to be okay on a stage and be fine. And so he made us dance and sing for the mailman who came and Bobby. And so I developed the ability to be okay with standing in front of audiences. I remember just being in malls with music on. My dad's like, go dance for everyone, Justin. It's like, okay. And I have my best boys, my MC Hammer dances in my back pocket. So we have that. I was a broadcaster. I for 4 years, I learned how to write like we speak. I know how to be on camera. I know how to interview people, and so I learned those skills. As a teacher, I learned how to build curriculums. I learned how to ask effective questions. I learned how to do to create lesson plans for kinesthetic learning. I didn't learn that in grad school. I learned that through my experience as a waiter. I was a waiter for years. I learned how to build relationships of trust and start deep conversations quickly. So all of these lessons that I learned just from as I kept pivoting from role to role, I just pulled along all of those skills that I learned previously. And I would like to say that all of those things, I tried to bundle them together to do what I do now.
Yeah, I love how you've identified your skill set in that regard. I mean, you've isolated the specific, skills that have evolved over your career and have used them to your advantage. And I think it's amazing. So I love hearing that. With respect to the activities that you conduct, what's the most interesting, of them all, if you will? And, of the activities, what do you dislike about your role or career?
Yeah. When you say activities, are you talking about just duties, like things that I do?
Yeah, maybe just general responsibility, the nuances of the job.
Yeah. So what you're right, because a lot of times, like, okay, mental skills coach, you talk to people. It is so much more nuanced than that. It's collaborating with a nutritionist and collaborating with sports science. It's working with athletic trainers and coach. There's so much that goes into it. I love to teach. I absolutely love to teach. And so anytime I have the chance to teach, in the group setting is my favorite. I love the energy. I love the kinesthetic learning, the fun we have. I like it's called edutainment. I love to teach fun ways where they're laughing, they're competing, and then stop. And what's the lesson we can pull from this, and how do we apply it to being the best version of yourself? I really enjoy that. And I also love the one-on-one as well, to be able to build relationships so strong that they can bear the weight of truth, and to sit knee to knee with an elite athlete, or anybody for that matter, to trust you enough to share with you their vulnerabilities, to share with you their weaknesses, their blind spots, or give you permission to share your opinion, or where their thinking process probably isn't the best. For them to give you permission to do that, I love that so much. And this part that I don't like as much, the paperwork. I don't like the just putting in the data, putting in just all of that stuff. But it's for what's required. So you could be an effective practitioner.
No, I'm right there with you on the paperwork.
Yeah, I love how you spoke to just you're dealing with people, right? So like your job is people's stories, listening to their stories, understanding their background, how they got to where they are, and then where they are right now. And I think that is so, in a lot of ways unique, because everyone's story is so different, right? So like we can generalize certain topics and belief systems and maybe effective patterns on how to handle or manage circumstances, but really people are so different. And so it's, you're surrounded by, you could have one player that's the extreme opposite, from gift set to personality traits to all those kind of things. So I think it's cool that you're so passionate about really engaging with people and their full story, not just like, how do I get you to perform better?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see. In order to do this, you really have to do your best to listen with a non-judgmental ear, and to really deeply understand where this person is coming from. I need to constantly ask myself, what would have to be true? What would I have to believe in order to act this way, in order to think this way? And so it's less, you're wrong, you can't be thinking like that, because if you come in with that attitude, no one's going to want to talk to you. And so I'm again privileged, grateful for the opportunity to be able to, like you said, Shelley, listen to people's stories, because they fascinate me. And not just professional athletes. I've had just from young athletes, from young kids to hairstylists, insurance agents. People have amazing stories.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I'm going to ask a few questions that are a little more personable. So feel free to skip if you want. But was there a career setback for you that you can probably say now is to your advantage, but maybe in the moment was like, okay, this could be crushing. And if so, can you speak to maybe how you managed it and push through? Because obviously I think that, a lot of people go through that, at some point in their career.
I feel lots of failures. I have a lot of private failures where people wouldn't even notice, but I'm thinking, I could have approached that better. I could have asked that better. I could have forged that relationship better. Saying nothing would have been better than giving my opinion. But it didn't really create a whole lot of rift. No one would have even noticed. But then I've had moments in my career where, people noticed. And it was whether either lack of competence, where I've never been in that situation before, or it was just lack of preparation. There's one in particular that I remember. So I'm working with the American Samoan soccer team. And at the time, they were the worst national team in the world. I think they lost to Australia like 28 or 32-0. Soccer. This is soccer, not football. So I'm working with them, and we're in New Caledonia, and I'm speaking to the team about motivation. And there was a camera crew, not even a camera crew, a guy with a camera in the back of the room. And he goes, "Do you mind if I record what you're about to say?" And I said, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, no problem." I didn't even think about who this person was. And so I go and I give a little spiel, and I talk about motivation, and I say, I tell the story of the first blind man who climbed Mount Everest. And at the end of the story, I said, and that's how he climbed Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in North America. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, yeah, okay, I got the country wrong. It's in Nepal. Okay, great. Not that big a deal. Not that big a deal until about 2 years later, I'm getting blown up on Twitter and my text messages, and people are like, what? They're calling me the worst names in the world. I'm like, what is going on? This guy with the camera in the background, he turned out to be it was a documentary for the team.
Oh.
He turned it into one of the biggest renowned documentaries of the year, got awards for it. Hundreds of thousands of people saw it. And mine was the opening scene, and where I talk about it was in Nepal. In North America. Mount Everest was North America. I was so embarrassed. For hours a day, I'm going on Twitter apologizing. Oh, I'm an idiot. I can't believe I did that. I need to mix in a map. And so that taught me a very valuable lesson to have your facts straight. Make sure you know your stories. Make sure you have cross your T's, dot your I's. Don't fake things, and be authentic. If you don't know, you don't know. And but yeah, that was a embarrassing lesson that I'll never forget.
Thanks for sharing. We all have our stories, I'm sure. And yeah, this is maybe a side tangent, but social media. How do you manage that? That is your face, that is consistent. You're active on LinkedIn, you're active on those platforms. So just speak to us on how you kind of know how to navigate it with giving content, but not too much. And then also, like, you don't have to share a story about maybe when you share content you wish you hadn't, but more like how do students manage that moving forward as the industry kind of explodes into this media environment, atmosphere. Really, that's how we're engaging right now. So
right, and that's one of the things. So think about sports psychology. Is once you get your master's in sports psychology, it's not like a dentist or a doctor, or there's not all these job opportunities out there. You have to have this entrepreneurial kind of vein thread going through you to be able to create your own opportunities if there isn't something out there for you. And that's what I ended up doing. And so in this podunk city in Utah, I didn't have a whole bunch of opportunities to go out and work with these elite teams because I'm in the middle of nowhere with my wife and 3 kids, and we couldn't go do an internship or go do anything. So I used and leveraged technology, social media. This is back in 2009 at the time where it wasn't very big. Instagram wasn't around yet at the time. It was Facebook and Twitter, which was just getting off the ground. And I used social media as a tool to teach. I used it as an opportunity to get reps because who else am I going to teach? And so I wrote articles. I started putting out my thoughts and my tweets. And every time I hit publish or send, I would flinch a little bit, like, I hope I'm not making myself look like a fool. Just questioning because I didn't know a lot, but I was sharing with the world what I did know. I did know this because I just studied it, and so let me share it with you. And that's how I use social media as a teaching tool. And you'll see if you follow me, I'm really consistent. I study every day. And I take what I study, I synthesize it, and I share it with the world. And the things that I regret sharing are more like family stuff, more like, I probably shouldn't have shown my son doing that, or I probably shouldn't have shown my daughter, probably shouldn't have shown this side of me and my goofy side with the world. But you know what, that's, I've had it a few times. My wife's like, you want to take that one down of our daughter. Okay. So that's my biggest failures have been.
Yeah, but some of those are the ones that humanize you. You know,
right? Exactly. Right. So, yeah.
One half.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of, your family, how do you maintain the work-life balance with, the sport industry being on, in season, out of season, on the road, off the road? Yeah, how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's very difficult, especially working with professional sports. Wasn't as hard working at IMG. Wasn't it hard working with the military? IMG was still very, very busy. You can be as busy as you need to be or as you want. The double-edged sword of loving what you do is you can do it all the time, like no problem at all. And so I've had to learn to set boundaries, to for myself and for the people who I work with. And really, when I'm with my family, just really be with the family. My daughter, she's an actor. She travels around the world. My son, he's in the music producing. He's gone all over the place. And so we really try to maximize the time we are together. Even if we're not together a lot, phones are away. We're here. We're present. We're maximizing this time together just so we can have some good times. But yes, they know when baseball season's coming. Cool thing is they can go to the games and they cheer the team on. But again, there's nothing like having dad home. But it does get difficult sometimes. Sometimes when I'm at work, you're thinking, oh, I'm a terrible dad. And sometimes when you're at home with the family, you're like, oh, I'm a terrible employee or I'm a terrible mental performance coach. And it's constantly tugged, wondering if you're doing it right. And from what I hear a lot of people go through that. So I'm not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I know you and I talked about this briefly, but do you find, what's more valuable for your career? Is it your education or your experiences? I'm sure the answer is both, but for your specific role today, what would you say?
Yeah, I think it is both. It is both, but because I think my education is continual. I think it's still going. The person I was when I graduated grad school, I'm not even close to that person anymore. What I have learned after grad school, I'm still getting an education. The books that I'm reading are in microeconomics right now. And then the one before that I was studying a prospect theory, and then I'm studying physical science, and I'm studying chemistry. I'm learning as much as I possibly can so I can create this lattice work of mental models, different multidisciplinary approach to these solutions. I think the person with the least amount of blind spots wins if you can act on that. And so I'm trying to continue and perpetuate my education, not necessarily with letters behind my name, but from learning podcasts and buying textbooks and learning from all these different types of domains. And so I value my education so much as I continue to do it every day. And then really deducing lessons and learning from my experience and knowing that not a lot of people have the experience that I have. And so taking advantage of that to learn, to write down ideas and to write down where am I messing up, where having a decision-making journal and saying, okay, this is my decision to how to approach this. Didn't work with this guy. This is why. Or this approach, should have done this better. And so just constantly learning. So I think I'm still pursuing my education as we speak and combined with my experience. So I still think it's both. It's both for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I definitely would agree. My experience always channels my educational interest and then vice versa. So it's like this cycle that, you run through. But so outside of that, though, obviously we got to kind of touch on COVID and communicable disease transmission and those kind of factors of concerns. How is that hindered, helped? What you see with respect to athletes' mental performance issues? Are there any? Are you seeing an improvement in athletes' mental stabilities? Are you seeing a decline, or kind of just a stabilization, if you will?
Yeah, you're definitely noticing it's coming up. It's the topic. It's I think when you have a disruptor, the way COVID disrupted our routines as much as it did, not just pro athletes, but all of us. All of our routines were rocked. And anytime someone's routine is rocked, it takes a little while to adapt. It takes a little while to get your feet under you. And that's when you realize that your rock solid habits aren't so rock solid. And all of a sudden your environment changes and now you have to change things up. To go from playing in front of 65,000 people to playing in front of nobody is a huge difference. To going from all being in the same locker, having fun together, to everyone spread out and we have to wear masks everywhere, that's different. Going in hotel rooms and not being able to leave your hotel room. So there's a lot of different obstacles that the players and the staff and everyone, not just athletes, all of us had to learn how to overcome. But as we learned with evolution, these principles of evolution, Darwin says adapt or die. And that was one of our things as we tried to be successful the best we could. It was like, okay, let's adapt. Let's adapt as fast as we can. It's hard. It's going to be difficult. But if we could adapt faster than our opponents and learn faster, then we're going to have a competitive edge. And so these players, I'll just speak for us, is like they just had to learn how to adapt. And the first thing they had to do was establish their new routines. Okay, what can I not do anymore? This is what I can control. I need to establish my routines as fast as I can. What are my go-to habits, and who are my go-to people? And once you establish that, that becomes the foundation from which you can build. But yes, it was very difficult. It led to a lot of new conversations we didn't have in 2019.
Yeah, and I'm hoping as we progress that they become embedded in, our processes and policies moving forward, so that we aren't blindsided by something like this again in the event that it does occur. So I think there's going to be a huge shift in the way that we are proactive in nature with these types of derailments, if you will. So I'm going to kind of shift to some student-focused type of questions. So if you were to give students any advice with respect to your field or career interests, what would that be?
Yeah, advice for this. I would think for those who want to pursue a job in sport and performance psychology, you need to understand which direction you want to go. So you can go the performance realm, which is my realm. It's optimizing performance, it's motivation, it's confidence, it's focus, it's team cohesion, it's leadership. Or you can go the mental health side, which is huge for now, which is you can help with depression and disorders, and you can be a mental health counselor and psychologist. That's where you get your psychologists, psychiatrists, licensed practitioners, counselors. You can choose which one you want to do, which path do you want to go. And some people do both. Some do both. And so whatever works best for you, I opted to go to solely the performance route. It is that's just right in my wheelhouse. That's where I feel most comfortable. So that's where the person would need to really look and see where do they want to go, what works best for them. But then also studying other industries. To your point, Brent, as you were saying, like being willing to study. I loved it. I went on this binge where I was studying advertisers, and then I was studying negotiators, and then I was studying designers. Then I was studying script writers for movies, the arc of a hero. And I think that is where you're going to find a lot of hidden gems that you can apply to your own work as you get outside your industry. You're going to see in any industry you choose, everyone's reading the same books, everyone's listening to the same podcasts. And if everyone's doing that, they're going to regurgitate the same information. I wanted to get out of that industry. Who can I learn from where nobody else in my field is learning? And I'm so grateful that I've gone down that path.
Yeah, that's actually incredible advice. I think I'm going to take that advice on myself.
Agree.
And start to read outside of my field. If you were to tell a student what kind of qualifications you were looking for upon hiring for these types of jobs, what do they need?
Yeah. So we just, I was grateful for the opportunity to spearhead. We just hired 4 mental performance coaches for the Tampa Bay Rays for our minor leagues last year. And we called them the 5 C's. So this was the criteria that we used to hire people. Number 1 was competence, or your competence. Simply, how well can you, with mental performance skills, mental skills training, how well do you know confidence, self-efficacy, self-determination theory? Just how good do you know the stuff? Okay. And can you apply it in many different domains, different people? Competence. Number 2 is creativity. Can you think outside the box? Can you look at where no one else is looking? Can you use the white space of a person's time to be able to fit in there, to be able to teach? The next one is communication. How good of a writer are you? Can you speak on camera? Can you write? Can you create posts to where the athletes can interact with it? Can you send good text messages? Can you story tell? Communication. Number 4 is collaboration. This job isn't just working with the players. That's it. You need to be able to collaborate with the analysts. You got to be able to walk into a room full of analysts and speak their language and be able to perpetuate their initiatives. You need to walk in a room full of players and be able to help them. You need to walk into the room full of the strength and conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, to be able to connect with everybody in the organization. And number 5 is connection. Can you connect the then and there, or the principles, to each individual person to make it relevant to them? And so that's really what we were looking for. And we asked questions and gave them different scenarios to see how good they were doing that, or even their humility, their intellectual humility to say, I don't know. And if you can say, I don't know, oh, that is huge. Then yes, we'll work with that. Yeah. As opposed to just faking and lying, acting like you can, like you do know what you're talking about.
Now we live in such a world today, it seems like, where people just give you an answer, even though it's the wrong one, or I much prefer, like you, just tell me you don't know. You know what I mean? And then we'll go from there and we'll make it happen type deal. So it's refreshing. I'm not sure I would pass your test. It's fairly complicated. So it could be very intimidating, if you will. So I appreciate the 5 C's and the paces that you put individual. Obviously, by the time that you've identified someone and you've taken them through, those 5 C's, you're going to have a real firm grasp of, are they capable, competent, can they communicate? And those aren't easy tasks to be successful in.
Right.
So it takes a special kind of person, I can imagine, to really be able to connect, because as you said earlier, you're working with athletes and those that are big personalities, right? And trust issues in some instances. So connecting with them is not easy. And I know that there's some, tight circles with respect to those individuals, and to break in and to be able to break into to help them. Wow. That cannot be easy. So I admire what you're doing, Justin. It's incredible work. So, and I'm glad there's others that are interested in it, because I do think we are at a time and place where there is tremendous need for it. So that's wonderful. Now, one last question, and then I'm going to pass you off to Shelley for a real fun experience. So okay. I'm not sure you're ready for this or aware.
It's not that complicated, I promise. It's fun.
Complicated. So if students wanted to connect with you in some capacity, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I'm pretty accessible on social media, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn, and at Justin Sua, JUSTINSUA. And I tend to answer all of my messages if I can get to them. But yeah, I'm pretty easy to find.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. We're excited. I'm sure you're gonna have some people reaching out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Be prepared. All right. So with that said, Justin, I pass you off to Shelley for this amazing experience.
Okay. Yeah. Before that, I have one thing. I just keep thinking before we do this next segment, the athletes, like, having played on a team sport in college and then after, and it's like all of those athletes like getting their routine taken away. I mean, I can only imagine. I thought about that because I still communicate with the soccer program at Florida, who I used to work for, and but I mean, to really think like that, we are like, athletes are innately just routine rituals, from like, this is my dirty jersey, I will not wash until I lose.
Right.
To like, no, I eat 3.5 hours before I play, and then I go to my locker and I listen to my music. And then I hang out with this teammate and we like do our thing. And then I step on the field. So yeah, I know. I'm like, wow, yeah, that is complex. And I'm sure you had some people really rattled outside of what is already like a rattling situation, collectively, but individually. Yeah.
Well, you hit the nail. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in addition to the players, even the families had the routine of going to the games, dropping off kids, and then, and even kids going to school. Now we have coaches and players who are in a home with their kids who go to school and come back. And now it's like, wait a minute, you can't give it to me. So it threw everything off. And so, yeah, to your point, we are the creatures of habit, and it definitely had a domino effect on everybody.
Yeah, I think there's going to be lots of great stories that eventually rise out of this time.
Right,
maybe not.
Right, you're right.
Yet. It's not funny right now, but
I agree.
Awesome. Okay, so here's the next segment. It's just called, I just kind of made it up, but I call it the 1 minute fire away. So I'm gonna put a little timer on for 1 minute, and then I'm gonna ask you some relatively easy questions. Whatever comes to mind, you respond, and we'll just see how many you get through in a minute.
Okay.
So let me set our timer really quick. All right, here we go. Favorite sport to play?
Baseball.
First job?
Umpire.
Current hobby?
Reading.
LinkedIn or Twitter?
Twitter.
Netflix, Prime Video, or cable?
We're Netflix.
Nice.
And why is that?
Just because we don't really have the other two.
Name 2 daily habits you have.
I study, or I read, and I work out.
Okay. And what old person things do you do?
Old person things that I do. I gotta be careful answering this. I like to sit and look at sunsets. No.
Awesome. All right, that's time. Time is up. Well done. That's
funny.
great.
I don't even know if what would be your answer to that question?
Oh, that's a good. I drink decaf coffee when I go out to dinner.
Okay. Brian, how would you answer that?
Listen, I'm probably the only old person in this. So, outside of that, I'm taking naps.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. Okay, yeah, that I've never heard that one. Yeah.
The older I get, I'm like, I need to hit the reset.
That's a good one.
Well, Justin, thanks so much. Go ahead, Brian.
So, Justin, it's been a real pleasure having you on today and joining us to talk about your professional endeavors. I am certain that the University of Florida Department of Sport Management students, faculty, and alumni appreciate and value your thoughts that you've shared with us today. So, but with that said, I mean, before we depart today, do you have any concluding remarks that you'd like to share? Anything you'd like to add?
I think just in closing, as we go forward with this, just the uncertainty around everything going on, I think I would just continue to encourage anyone listening to, it's easier said than done, but to really focus on what we can control. I think that's the one thing that separates, one of the many things that separates the best in their field from the rest is it's easy to beat up on ourselves about the past or about the future, like we talked about, but identifying what can I control right now and staring the brutal facts in the face, really staring the brutal facts in the face and calibrating your confidence to be able to say, okay, not being overly optimism bias, but to be able to say, okay, put a probability on your success and do whatever you can to increase the odds of success through your habits, through your behavior, and through your attitude. I think that'll really help you navigate the ups and downs.
Yeah, that's a fantastic parting message. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Once again, thank you so much for your time today. Both Shelley and I, as your host, appreciate and value it, and we look forward to our students being able to reach out to you and connect in some meaningful ways. And then if you have any needs on our end, please reach out. And we'd love to have you back in a variety of different capacities if you're willing. So with that said, once again, thank you so much for your time and go Gators.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. Appreciate it.
Be safe.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.